Hi, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and I am super excited to have Meghan Walsh on, again today. We've got quite a bit to talk about, and she's going to be on in just a minute. Before she comes on, I'm going to go ahead and play this video. Last time she was here, she talked, just a quick recap. Meghan talked about her story about how her father, John Walsh, who ran for decades, really, FBI's Most Wanted on, I think it was on Fox, and she began to speak out against child trafficking, and John Walsh ended up, her father ended up working with her children's fathers to take her children away from her through the court system, and CPS came and removed her five-day-old infant from her arms after, on a judge's orders. She had no criminal background at all, and it's an absolutely tragic story. And about 2 years later, she still does not have her children, doesn't have any access to her children, and it's terrible. So, Meghan, glad you're here. Thank you and welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Hi, Scott. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back.
So you just sent me this video, and I kind of reviewed it. This is a news story about a child where a case where CPS actually told a 14-year-old child to become a prostitute. Is that correct?
That is, Scott.
So let's go ahead and watch this. This is a 3-minute clip, and then we will talk about that and several other things. So thank you again for being here. I'm glad you're here.
And we begin tonight with a story that you'll only see here on Fox. An employee with Child Protective Services is caught on camera telling a 14-year-old girl in foster care to become a prostitute.
That's right, and this girl is one of hundreds of kids in CPS custody living in hotels all over the state. Fox 26's Randy Wallace live from Southwest Houston here with this story. Randy, the exclusive.
Yeah, Jonathan. Now, earlier this year, a federal judge scorned Child Protective Services for making kids available for prostitution in the CPS system. Now we have a case where an employee with that state agency is actually encouraging prostitution of a 14-year-old child.
Don't be a real hoe. Wouldn't they remove a child from a parent that told their child to be a prostitute?
They should. And they would.
Keisha Basley has 9 kids. She turned to Child Protective Services to help her with her 14-year-old daughter, who she says was running away and causing trouble at school.
My daughter told me that the worker had been telling her that she should do these things. So she said she decided to video her.
CPS is housing the girl at a hotel. She's one of dozens in Harris County. In the video, she tells the CPS employee she wants food. The CPS worker tells her to be a prostitute.
I mean, she was basically encouraging a 14-year-old girl to become a prostitute.
And giving her an incentive to do so, and almost a threat of not having her needs being met if she didn't do what this woman very explicitly told her to do.
If the parent, was to do something like this to my child, I would be bashed. I would be called a horrible parent. I would lose my kids.
Basley filed a formal complaint with CPS.
This should not happen to girls in their care. This should not happen. This is unacceptable.
Jamie Masters, the commissioner of CPS, came to Houston to personally apologize to Basley and her daughter.
I've never seen that happen before, where a commissioner of CPS comes in from Austin just to apologize about something that's horrible that's been done to a child and a parent involved with CPS.
I do not believe that that was genuine. I really don't.
It's bad enough if it's one rogue caseworker.
Maybe $1,500. How much money gave him?
It concerns me that it may be bigger than that. And they need to investigate this and make sure that it's not just one person. And they've got to figure out a way to protect these kids.
CPS sent us the following prepared statement. DFPS is aware of the video and has taken action. The person in the video, who was employed as CPS support staff, was dismissed from her position August 10th. The safety and appropriateness with which children in care must be treated is our paramount concern. Nothing less will be tolerated. Reporting live from the Southwest side, Randy Wallace, Fox 26 News.
Okay, that is a just terrible story. Meghan, the so what I understand, do you know about the backstory here? You're on mute. I don't know if I can unmute you. There we go. Nope, you have to unmute yourself. Can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself? There should be a mute button. Do you see it on your? It won't let me unmute you. I think you muted yourself. Do you see the mute button? Okay. It doesn't look like you could hear me at all. You can't hear me? It looks like she's frozen. Okay. Let me just text her real quick. Can you hear me now, Meghan? Okay. Meghan is, so she left where she was living in Vero Beach, Florida, for her own personal, out of concerns for her personal safety. And she's living in another state in a rural location, and she has very bad internet access. So that's what's going on. But and so as I just asked her to reconnect, and so she'll be back in a minute. But what I understand in talking to Meghan and talking to others is that so in this case right here that we just saw on this news footage was that they're showing a 14-year-old child in Houston who was taken away from her parents, and I mean, they interviewed her mother, and so why she wasn't with her mother, I have no idea. And then they put her in a hotel, and then they have a CPS caseworker telling this 14-year-old girl to work as a prostitute in order to have food. And obviously things aren't well if you've got a 14-year-old child living in a hotel. I mean, that's pretty messed up to begin with. But and then she doesn't have enough food. So yeah, that is crazy. Couple comments here in the Matrix. So glad you're here. Wanted to stop in and say hello. We'll have to watch this important episode later. Great. And I understand you're going to be on CNN tonight that you taped with, I think, Anderson Cooper, and can't wait to see that. And Kat says, hi, Kat. It's really good to see you. And Shelly B says, my heart breaks for Meghan Walsh. She needs all the prayers she can get. Her father and mother are evil. So with that, it looks like we've got a better connection now. Can you hear me okay? Meghan, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, there we go.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Why can't you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. I can hear you.
Okay. We've had internet issues all morning, so I apologize. Okay.
Great. Well,
okay, good. I can hear you too. We might have delay.
All right. Well, that's fine. So I'll try not to interrupt you. So is there anything that you want to share? I kind of broke down a little bit that with this video that we just watched. This was, and this is just one story. This is in Houston, Texas. We interviewed the mother. And so for some reason, the child had been taken away from her mother and was living in a hotel. And a CPS caseworker is telling her and she doesn't have enough food. She's asking this caseworker for more food. And then the CPS caseworker's response to that is, well, go become a prostitute. And, it's good that the CPS regional manager or something came personally and apologized to the mother. But I mean, is the child back together with the mother? Do you know anything about the backstory with this, or, is there anything you'd like to say about that video? There is a tremendous delay.
Yeah, Scott, I do have to say that we don't know the follow-up beyond what was revealed in that clip as far as them apologizing or personal story, of another mother dealing with and trafficked. Oh no. On that to keep Florida to legal and Florida offices keeping air mattresses in their conference rooms for children, keeping children in hotels, stacked foster homes, and conditions like was mentioned in the clip that our children would be removed from us if we were keeping them in those conditions that CPS is actually able to do. Again, we had air mattresses, Scott, in the conference rooms at my local CPS office for children to be brought in, not even a full bathroom, not food. I witnessed children crying and begging to just have a birthday with their family, that they had good family, that had homes or could take them in. Kinship placement, and they were being denied and saying, I just wanted a birthday from, my once in my life at 15 on the outside, quote unquote. I've heard children in the offices talking about tape being put on the floor in the foster homes that they're in, and then being told that they can, only go in certain places at certain times. As well as even, children calling their biological parents when they still have contact and saying, I'm now, dating one of my foster siblings, and things to that nature. So this is a different side of what's really going on. We've always said, and we want to have a very real and moderate conversation about this, but the issue of child trafficking by our government systemically is a very heavy and a very depraved issue and situation to be talking about. And now we're just happening, like I said before, to see it on the border, and people are actually witnessing it, where in America we're the land of the influencers and the 2.5 kids in a white picket fence. What do we think that child trafficking is going to look like in America? And we have to start looking at that. We can say, oh, my Aunt Susie was a social worker and she did a wonderful job, or, oh, there are children that are returned. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a large percentage of a failing business that has been incentivized and has been infiltrated to an extent of danger to our children and our families across America. And we need to put that focus. We know statistically off the bat that if a child is kept in their their biological environment, I should say, because the system loves to intermix biological and primary environments, and that's something that needs to be articulated. But in the biological family, if a child is kept in their biological family and their environment, no matter whether there is an issue like domestic violence or substance abuse, that it is actually in the long term better for the interest of the child to be kept in that environment. obviously, that environment improved and brought, but that's really where we're missing the holistic aspect of what CPS should be and where it's failing today in terms of just the focus on our children, backed by great quotas and incentives. And we know that through Title IV funding, as well as ASFA, the American Safe Families Act, brought in by the Clintons, which actually put bounties on our children's heads through incentives and quotas each month, or each year, excuse me, for further funding.
So there are two issues. What you're describing here is two really, really big problems systemically in the situation. The first is that there's this profit motive for CPS to take children from their parents, and for courts to actually take children from their parents. And it benefits hospitals that take children from
And
their parents.
schools.
And schools. And this I kind of liken to what happened in COVID, where we had hospital, doctors and nurses and hospital workers who were lying, committing fraud about cause of death in order to say it was a COVID death, in order to because for profit, and then putting patients on ventilators that didn't need to be on ventilators, or putting them on medications that destroyed their livers, and getting them vaccinated, and things that were so it's the same kind of thing where they were making bad choices for that even to the point of killing people. And so we saw hospitals do this, where doctors and hospital workers were rejecting, their Hippocratic oath to do no harm, and in the name of profit. And so it's a similar. I think to me, that's a way that I can understand it. How this can happen is that there's this profit motive and you talked about Title IV and this other program that came out of the Clinton administration, that provides funds to states and locals, and to CPS and to hospitals to take children away from their parents. So there's this profit motive, but then there's this other thing, which is that there is a general bias, and this is more of a cultural thing. I think that that a lot of people have said politics is downstream of cultural, and this is a cultural thing that really it's going to take a lot of work to get this to the point of mainstream understanding. But our bias as a culture, as a society, should never be to take children away from parents, or to try to create a better situation for parents, right? Or for children. I mean, there really is no better situation for a child than their parents, even if it is borderline abusive, unless the child's life is truly at imminent threat by living with their parents. The child really needs to stay with their parents, even if it's an abusive situation. Because who is to determine what is, it's a very difficult situation. And in your case, for example, I was actually talking to my mom about it, and she said, well, how does Meghan feel about, should CPS have taken her away from her parents if her parents were abusive and if she was growing up in a terrible situation? And so how would you answer that? And do you agree that you think that the parents should always, or children should always be with their parents?
Well, of course I do. I know fundamentally, and especially with what I believe, just by human nature and understanding trauma and understanding, children and where we go from there, why do we all wonder about God? Even if you don't believe in God, you wonder about God because that's where you come from. It's your place of origin. And so when our families are our place of origin here on the earth, and when we're taking children, especially out of the hospital, as newborns, the younger and younger that we take them, we're denying those children. I mean, we talk about children's rights and the protection of children and every day in this country, but we never truly look from the perspective of the children that are being put through these systems or being cut off from their biological families. And furthermore, a lot of them are finding out when they do grow up that their biological families did fight for them and did want them, but the state took them and adopted them. We're finding that, even if you give cake, cookies, and a mansion to a child, that is not their place of origin. They are growing up and saying, when you're hugged and it's not your real parent, even if I had pool parties every weekend, for example. And this is the real nature of what's going on, because we are splitting children from their original place of origin, their parents, their biological families. And, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, a bad example, a bad phrase to use, but it really is. And we're supposed to love thy neighbors. So why would we be taking children from their families who have the most, the most inclination, if you will, to love them deeply, and then handing them to strangers and paying these strangers to take care of them, and telling these children, this is your new home, these are your new parents, this is where you're going to be, and you should be very happy about it. I don't think we would have the high rates of runaways and suicides within this if it was such a better option, Scott. I don't think that would be the case. So we have to be looking at the subjectivity that we are allowing. If we don't like that someone, like we were speaking before, if we don't like that someone spanks their child or that they feed them this kind of food, we can't be saying that it's okay to take their children or that they're bad parents. As you also addressed, and I've said repeatedly, we have a criminal justice system. If I was really starving my children or beating my children or anyone else's, then they should be in jail. I should be in jail. And actually where we're at in these courts are that criminals actually have more rights than the parents do in the courts that we have to go into between dependency and family court. Criminals actually are given due process, whereas the Constitution, perjury, due process, none of that actually happens or matters in these court cases and in these administrative courts, if you will. So that's been a huge problem, and we can't be taking children. If we want to help each other, if you want to help children and you want to say, I want to help a child out of a bad situation, then ask, is the parent maybe having a substance abuse issue because they can't pay their bill? They just lost their job in these times. I mean, in these times over any others, people are struggling, and we need to come together to say, okay, what does the child need? And, does the family need counseling? Do they need financial support? Do they need work? And come together as a community to improve the homes and livelihoods and put an emphasis back on the importance of the family and what that is for children.
Yes. I want to share some thoughts from Kat, because I think that these are important thoughts. So she says, disagree. Children should not always stay with either parents, but it should be the exception. And she says they should not remain if there is any physical abuse. And I think you kind of spoke to that. If there is physical abuse, if there is starvation, if there is any number of things that's the whole purpose of our criminal justice system, and they should be in jail. And and then she also says, I don't think this problem is as black and white in terms of solutions. The incentives need to end. And that's the profit incentive. Just absolutely it is completely turned upside down. It's very similar to what welfare really was designed to do to minority populations in this country. Creating an incentive structure that would break up families, and this is very similar to that.
Right. And that does also, it's not black and white at all. This is a very, very nuanced topic and situation that, that we have to talk about and deal with and navigate. It's not black and white, and there's easy arguments, and it's not necessarily that it's easy. It's that the masses have had a certain impression, and we've been told a certain thing, and it's something that not all of us, have to deal with every single day. So, there are these discussions that need to be talked about, and there are many nuances. But of course, there's good social workers. Of course, there's real issues of neglect and abuse, but also those issues become much more manageable, which don't we want to be able to solve things and manage things and heal things, prevent things, all of that. It makes it much more manageable and much better, especially on a community level, for us to be able to handle, because we aren't being told that hundreds of thousands of children need loving homes. No, hundreds of thousands of children are being taken from their homes. But also, in the day and age that we're in, those homes need help. We're not throwing away the homes and taking the children. That's where it comes down to. And again, there's many different aspects of this. This is just one. Absolutely.
Right. So, systemically, there's some claims that you made in the last episode that I think are good to address and to try and to work to support. And so, one of those is that just the general claim that the foster care system is the largest source of human trafficking, child trafficking, especially in this country, and that it's even larger than the 320,000 missing children over the last 4 years through that have come across the border. And so, what if you could support that claim in terms of, with statistics, or, how you arrived at that conclusion? I think that would be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sent you a couple screenshots or whatnot for proofs. I please ask anyone to Google or look these, whatever search engine you use or whatnot, but please feel free to look all of this up. Obviously, statistically, they change here and there depending on the year. And as well, we're talking about CPS. So I will preface with, I highly encourage you to look into your own county, your own state statistics, because in this, it does vary. So, but overall, we've had from the National Center, I did send you a little blurb about that, from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as well as the FBI, we have over 80% of child trafficking coming from the foster care system, whether that's through trafficking, runaways, foster care trafficking, many ways that it's done, but we have that statistic happening. And for example, a lot of it in the runaway situations, runaways through CPS are not reported on. So we have cases, and I'd be more than happy to, I didn't do it beforehand, but I'm more than happy to pull up articles where we even had, for example, a case.
Oh no.
Children were with the father. The children had actually disappeared, and the father was still collecting on the children for years, and she had no idea that the children were actually even missing. You can get into details about that, but the point is that there's runaways. These are not followed up on. We see workers, as the clip you just saw. So we're at a high percent. I mean, if we're saying 88 or 80% plus, and that's only the reported amounts are coming from the foster care system, my question then becomes, where is the National Center and the FBI addressing this? Where are the campaigns? Why don't people know about this? Why is it you and I here educating people on what's going on and having to really, drive that home for people, because many are still unaware of what's going on. So when we're there, that's almost 90%, which is almost 100. If we can take care of this, I'm bad at math, Scott, but 80% of the foster care system, if that's handled, that's contributing to child trafficking in America, I think that makes a huge difference. And I think that also makes the percentage a lot more manageable for us, but maybe not so exciting for them, because that means less funding. We have to remember that higher statistics equals higher funding. And that's all for these people, for funded agencies. And that's also why these numbers and what we're talking about are so important. it's also part of that ASFA incentivizing of removals to meet those quotas. And that's also how we see the systemic abuse trickle down to, yes, the caseworkers, to the administration, and then going up to the state attorneys. You know, these people need to meet these quotas, and they are doing vile things to do that.
Mhm.
Just like you compared with the hospital.
Right, right. And so I think that, you know, this is all really good. So we're talking about some solutions, and I think where what you're doing is a really important part of that, of creating solutions, which is educating the public about what's really going on. Because I would say that most Americans really have no idea what is going on. And so, you know, the work that you're doing is really important. And to that end, the next, you know, really important thing that for us to talk about is what happened. You've kind of just begun to describe to me, and hopefully you can share more with our audience, what your experience was actually with the Flynn Network. And Flynn runs the America's Future, which is family 501c3, and it was started actually by Phyllis Schlafly, John Singlaub, who was one of the founders of the CIA. And there is another man named Olin, who invented the plastic shotgun shell casing that was also involved in the founding. Excuse me, sorry about that. And there were others as well, but now it's been John Singlaub really was instrumental in bringing Flynn into it and transferring control of it to Flynn. And so now it's Mike Flynn, Joe Flynn, Mary Flynn O'Neill, their sister, and Laura Logan, Ivan Raiklin. I think Liz Crokin is on the board, and Tracy Beans. So that is the board of this organization, and they say that their focus is anti-trafficking. So if I'm going to let you speak now, and that's, you know, kind of so that you are involved in that, but I'd like to hear, you know, how you got involved in that group, and with you ended up being brought into their media group and that whole thing. So and what were the outcomes of that?
Thank you, Scott. And this definitely isn't easy to talk about, especially with, you know, the way that they're wailing threats around, and, you know, everything that I've been through with my children, and, you know, what we deal with daily in terms of threats and things like that because of the work that I do. But I do want to say that I was already doing this work. I was speaking out in my community. I was talking about CPS and family court trafficking before my children were ever taken. My children, I have beautiful pictures. I don't post my children online, but, you know, I have beautiful pictures of us at bridge walks and rallies, and them with their shirts on and things like that. So we were really trying to educate. We had great people and other moms in town with their children, and things that we were doing before this was ever, you know, an occurrence from a situation for me and my children. Obviously, growing am I back? Okay. Am I back? Okay, sorry. And so then, of course, I started, like we started this about the foster homes and things. I started asking, you know, in my town about the Hibiscus House is our local foster home. And my mother actually was used to start, you know, raise funds, to start the project. Whereas to date, I had been told by ex-employees and things that little girls were leaving in the morning and coming home in the afternoon with wads of cash, and they believed that trafficking was going on and things like that. So that's what I was doing within my community prior. Then obviously, you know, things started happening. My children were taken, and I started speaking out on podcasts and platforms. I left the industry in 2017, 2018, because I wanted to be behind the scenes. I was in fashion, I was in music, and I just wanted to be a mom and raise my children, you know, in a healthy, normal way, and help people with their trauma and lifestyle, and in a holistic manner. So when this happened with my children, I started speaking out. Obviously, the patriot community and conservatives were more inclined to hear my message because it having to do with my children and going back to Christ and different things like that, as well as who my father was and the larger implications of child trafficking that are present in my life. And then when I was in that advocacy work before, I should backtrack for a second. I apologize. This was a little off the cuff to talk about, Sky. I thought we were going to talk more about CPS, but so you'll have to forgive me. But when I was in that advocacy work, I was also online on Facebook and not on Twitter. I was on Facebook a lot. And if anyone goes on Facebook and just puts in family court corruption or CPS, there are endless groups. There are endless parents. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. That's what got me to start speaking up to begin with, to speak for these parents and these children. And so then, I met different people, and I had seen Mary Flynn on some interviews with a group called Let Our Children Go. And of course, it tugged at my heartstrings. It was a veteran and his wife, and they had their 6 children taken. Mary Flynn was talking about she actually has had a CPS issue with her, I believe it was her daughter, with her grandchild being taken. Don't quote me on that. I haven't, looked at that story in a long time, but she had a history with CPS and a removal. And so she had firsthand experience, was the impression I was under by Mary Flynn. When my children were taken, I reached out to Let Our Children Go immediately. I thought, these are the people that can help me. They're saying they're the main ones coming out. This is ex-military. This is Mary Flynn. This is credible. I emailed them. I received an email back saying that they couldn't help me, that there was nothing really they could do to help me, and some other things. This again was 4 years ago, almost three and a half years ago. And so then I went and started doing podcasts. I started getting involved with other advocates and, just doing what I could while, trying to deal with this court case and getting my children back, knowing, how this was going to work and how CPS works because of my advocacy before. And so then I started going on the podcast. And of course, it was when I'm in trauma and I'm trying to get my message out and all of that. I said to myself, Scott, I'm going to go on any show, because it doesn't matter about who's hosting it. It's about the audience. It's about the good people that are watching these different figures and want to know this information. There was this whole thing about end child trafficking and everything going on. So I started getting involved that way. That's how I ended up with, the Flynn Network more. I actually had a podcast where I had Mary Flynn on my podcast to support the work that they were doing. And then I reached out to Liz Crokin and went back and forth. We have messages back and forth, and was, just put off. And I still stay gracious. Then things like going to Turning Point and being in the trenches, with these people. I was on Nino's show. I went to Turning Point. We have the videos where I'm just going up and
We lost you again. So if you are just joining us, Meghan she's in a very remote location for her own safety, and she has shaky internet access. So we've lost her a couple times here on the show, but so she will be back here hopefully soon. Couple. Okay, yeah, you're back. Great. Just
to sum that up, I really, I was under the impression that these people were about child trafficking. So me going up and saying I'm John Walsh's daughter would not be something that I really needed to explain, to be honest. I thought that if you were in the know about this, if you knew about the NGOs, if you knew about the different ways of child trafficking, you guys are these big figures and behind the scenes, then I didn't think that, I thought that they knew what was going on, and they did. They knew the entire time. I don't really know how to talk about it, to be honest, Scott, because I was handled. My information was gate kept, and they breadcrumbed, oh, you can do Nino's podcast. Oh, you can do Ann Vandersteel, but let's not talk about this case, or let's not talk about that aspect of it. None of them would talk about John Walsh. None of them are talking about the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the connections there. And I've never accused anything. I've said that this needs to be investigated, that these are things that, now we see. When I was asking the questions, my children and my life have been taken for speaking up about this, for asking the questions. And when I got involved with the Flynn network, again, I don't really know how to talk about it yet, Scott, because it was really horrific. The just the gaslighting, the breadcrumbing, the gatekeeping, the handling, but then the grooming at the same time. It's very disturbing, while I'm thinking that I'm handing them, what they talk about every day. I'm handing them a celebrity or an elite that's actually in politics more than TV. And he's trafficking my children using the system that he helped to create, and that there are big questions that need to be asked about his affiliations or his NGO organizations. And things like that. So I know that God put me in that place for a reason. We've now seen, again, the video with Tim Ballard, the video with Dan Bongino. And I wasn't here to expose anybody. I've never even been here to expose my father. These are horrific things. And I just have been able to separate, who the people are versus if this is what they are doing. And if these are things that they're involved in, then it needs to be addressed no matter who they are. And when I started to feel that my information and the work that I was trying to do, it became more about, it's not the right timing for the movement, if you will, is what it began to feel like. And my story wasn't the right time. So, that's when I really realized what was going on. I realized who they, how they had been playing me, who they had sent in. And while it led to my children, being guaranteed to be with my parents and adopted out. If they didn't believe me, or they didn't want to help or couldn't help, then that would have been fine, Scott. That would have been fine with me. But they should have just said that then, and I would have been able to go on and get other resources and other help and things like that. But just the way that they really groomed and put me through the ringer, and the game that it was for them, it seems at this point. And now, when people speak up, I took almost a year to even come out about this, because it was so horrific, so mortifying. I still am in fear, at different times about things and people, and we always have to be careful about that. They're everywhere, and it's really wild, and that is wild. But it was a bad thing. And when I came out about it, recently, of course, we've gotten the damage control, right, Scott? You know about that well, from them. And just to say that, oh, we tried to help. First Flynn was saying that he didn't know who I was on a tweet. When I finally spoke up and said Flynn flam, wowza, 3-word tweet, I didn't know that it would get a 10-day, however many hundreds of thousands of people on the tweet. But all I said was Flynn flam, wowza. Don't say that word to Liz Crokin, because she hates when I say wowza. So that really got them going. And I actually had no idea. It was kind of my timid way to start speaking up about it. And it went haywire. Flynn got on there, and this is what they do. They get on, they know their followers are going to see their first tweet and not necessarily follow up and go in and start the attacks and everything. And he came in and said, made it like about his family, that I was coming after his family, which I know he likes to use a lot, which, I then took a screenshot of the definition of flim flam, which is where the reference came from, and pointed out that it's not fam. It doesn't have anything to do with family, Michael. The phrase doesn't have anything to do with that. And he said, I don't know who you are, but if you have something to say, you better say it and make sure it's accurate. So then, he's saying he doesn't know who I am. Meanwhile, my friends and people with him behind the scenes for the past years, he's been saying that Meghan's voice is a 10, on a scale from 1 to 10 in all of this. But he has no idea who I am on this tweet. Then Mary gets on, and Benny boy, Sun Tzu, gets on. And then they completely contradict Michael and say, we tried to help you, Meghan. We've tried to help you. So I thought that you didn't know who I was, but now you're trying to help me. Now it's shifted, now that more people are speaking out. And thank you, Scott, for what you're doing. It's very refreshing to have a grounded take on these things after years of being in this flim flam craziness, which is what they did on purpose to make child trafficking seem ridiculous and all these things that the masses wouldn't pay attention to. I give Michael Flynn credit there. He did a great job in gatekeeping the reality of child trafficking in America. He did a great job with his network of gatekeeping my story while my children were, being sold and moved around and all of the other stuff that went on. And then to now say that they tried to help me, but I'm problematic. Benny is claiming to call logs that we still have yet to see months later, saying that he's talked, to me. He never spoke to me. Patrick Burns, I've never spoken to in my life. But then they go around to other influencers or large accounts and try to say that I'm a liar or discredit me and get them to join in with me. I mean, the dirty, nasty little tactics. I'm glad it's coming out so that we can move forward, because this has really inhibited a lot of work that good people are trying to do. The buses and the movies and everything, all the donations that good Americans sent, thinking that they were helping and, going to see child trafficking, when really what they were doing was taking all of the funds and support and donations and visibility away from real victims and real advocates. There are real advocates across this country and in the UK and in Australia and everywhere that are doing amazing work and acknowledge that CPS is, trafficking their children between the family courts and CPS. Whatever it's called, in your area or in your country, that this is a huge issue. This is not and it's a mortifying situation when the masses in America you talk to and they still go, what are you talking about? That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the operation. This is the same exact thing that I've described in state Republican parties. That same thing that they did to the election integrity movement, the same thing they did to the health and freedom movement. They get into it and then they make it all about the wildest conspiracies, and they they act like a bunch of lunatics, and they are repulsive to the vast majority of Americans.
Yes.
So
yes.
Going on their shows, then you become identified with them, and that automatically discredits you. And it discredits and everything and your message. And so, and that seems to be an objective, because it's certainly an outcome. So, we can only assume their objectives based on the outcomes. And so, based on the outcome and because that's a consistent outcome among all of their various operations, I think it's pretty clear that is what they're trying to do within the anti-human trafficking movement.
Yeah, especially with the Sound of Freedom and this. I mean, to real advocates, victims, and survivors, to see this new movie, Operation Amber Alert. Amber Alert is what we talk about every day, that is used by the states to keep the CPS product in. If you look at Amber Alerts, the majority are a CPS or family case that are going on, and either the parent went and took the child from the foster care home, or where they're being abused most likely, or the child was going to run away, so the parent went and got them. I mean, there's so many, again, nuances to these things. And then here we have, Sound of Freedom, which, Yes, the border is a complete distraction of our trafficking machine, as we talked about on the last show. And the Sound of Freedom was great for people to wake up or that didn't know anything about child trafficking. But again, like I said last time, I feel like I'm discussing, foreign aid, here when we're talking about, not focusing on American children and families when this is happening versus, putting the emphasis on the border. And like you said, I think that they have done a great job at, discrediting, or when I come out, they've already set all this stuff up, and then I come out and say my stuff. And of course, again, I get chalked up and discredited when, the work that I do is from a very real place. I mean, we have SingLob in the National Center research that we're doing, and it ties in directly to that. And this is the information that these people don't want out. It became like Sound of Freedom, OUR, was, the National Center is getting found out. John Walsh is getting found out. We need to make a new grift under, a different name of people. Let's take advantage of people who care about children or Christians or whatever that is. And let's recreate that there. And I can get into that, in a different show or whatnot with research and proofs.
Yeah, I want to step back just a little bit and unpack, because you've just shared a ton of stuff. So first, OUR is Operation Underground Railroad. That's Tim Ballard's organization. So, a lot of people have seen that movie, The Sound of Freedom, that tells the story of Tim Ballard. And Tim Ballard is involved in this new movie, that the Operation Amber Alert that you just mentioned. And so, talk about Tim Ballard for a minute and why Tim Ballard might be a concern.
Well, Tim Ballard is a concern. I mean, we'll first state the obvious, the assault allegations and the sexual deviance and lawsuits that are going on there, which we do see a theme with these figureheads of children's NGOs having a pattern of sexual deviance in their past or in their private life. And so he is a big concern with that, as well as, we weren't following our own rules when we know that Carlos Slim has been funding this movie, or we know that they're promoting the Clinton Foundation, when we know about the hotline and we know how that works, as well as ASPA, which we even just spoke about earlier. When this is happening and this man is going out, it's, I don't know necessarily the concern besides the obvious, but I think that people need to understand, Scott, the child protection and safety grift that I brought up on the last show, and the propaganda and how that works, how CPS is really a procurer at this point for these NGOs. The NGO, that's statistics and funding. Again, it's a lot of, loopholes with lack of oversight, accountability, and high immunity. So we see that go with a character. So if we look historically at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, this was the first time when that was passed by Congress, not a grassroots organization. This organization was passed by Congress. That then it really was the first time that funding or legislative policy, power, lobbying, any of that was made in America dealing with children's rights and children's, protection, I should say more specifically. So that really established, the NGO playbook, if you will, right, for lack of a better way to put it. And then what we've seen from there, we had John Walsh. When we look at the National Center, we see that there was already legislation being shopped prior to my brother's case, prior to the disappearance of Adam Walsh, which is what prompted the founding of the National Center, is what we're told. So when you have legislation that was already being shopped around but had trouble with a sponsor, it needed a sponsor, it was having trouble getting through, then we have John Walsh and Adam happen. And then John Walsh comes out as the parent that's not going to let this be in vain, his child die in vain. They're going to make this foundation. Then we see the funding, the lobbying, the data collection, all of that comes right underneath that, right? Once that's established. And what if I go from that first instance and I fast forward to OUR and Tim Ballard, and there's a lot in between, like Child Focus out of Belgium, Thorn with Ashton Kutcher, the International Center for Missing Exploited Children, the McCann Foundation, all of these, we see this playbook and this theme of legislation or something that is already preconceived, a case that is then put in the news, and we wonder why certain cases are chosen or not. Then we see the parents come out and do the press conferences or whatnot. Then they form a foundation, and this is the playbook. Right now, they've got either data collection or DNA or Life Touch and the things we talked about last time. Now, how this goes back to Tim Ballard is that we need to understand what that NGO grift is and what that puppet is. Tim Ballard is another version of a John Walsh, just in 2024. It's the manipulation. I will say that it actually is great tactics of the CIA. Give you bits of the truth and then mix in your agenda, come with emotional, Tim Ballard's very in your face, Dan Bungie, very in your face. This is emotional, use of your emotions, right? Play on your emotions. We're giving you this graphic, horrific situation, which has now through the Flynn network become like child trafficking porn at this point. And I said that last time. And here's Tim, delivering this. These are the puppet masters. These are the ones that are the talking heads to deliver to you, what's going on. We have issues with the aftercare with, OUR. There's so many things. You could go into it from either this concept and how this is playing out nowadays and looking at an overall level, or you can go into OUR and Tim Ballard himself. I mean, Sound of Freedom would have been a great opportunity to actually show domestic trafficking and grooming in your communities and everything, with what that original case was actually about, that then they took and made up some crazy story about a child and, trafficking, and Tim Ballard is the savior that notices the child from the glimmer in his eye, kind of a thing. So.
Right. This is a good question here. Who are the finders? Blake says.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think I'd get to talk about that. No, thank you, Blake. So this, if we look historically, again, Flynn did a great job to make everything sound like a conspiracy, but if we look historically, we know from the D class that the Finders cult was a CIA operation originally. The Finders is the Finders cult, and that basically what that was a data gathering operation. So the CIA hired everyday people in your community, lawyers, accountants. So basically you wouldn't know, you would never think that they were part of it, right? And they were, they were doing operations, but the main thing that everyone knows about is when they were found out in Florida with the 6 kids. I believe I touched on it last time, maybe not. Maybe that was just in our private discussions, but the Finders cult became known because 6 children were taken in. 2 men were driving in a van. They had them in a park in Florida. The children were disheveled, nonverbal, dirty, everything. So, the authorities were called. The children were taken in. They displayed signs of sexual abuse. The 2 men were in suits, dark suits with white shirts and their mustaches. And they said that they were actually taking these children with permission of their parents to a school for special gifted children in Mexico, which is actually very interesting because of the Sound of Freedom storyline, being that the guy was taking the child back and forth into Mexico, and we see a lot of correlations, but I digress. The Finders cult then was investigated. The mothers came forward and said, yes, we gave permission. It was looked into because it had to be, because the public knew about it. And then like the McMartin case, it was, dissolved and went away. But the Finders cult was actually run by a gentleman that was ex-military by the name of Marion Petty. He had a farm in Virginia outside of Alexandria, where we moved after Adam's disappearance. And when my father started the National Center. But they had a farm there where they were doing teaching the children and having a lifestyle. So the cult believed that in this, it takes a village, like we hear from Hillary Clinton now. Historically, that's from Margaret Sanger and from the Finders cult. So we talk about that. But then they also had a warehouse outside of DC where they were taking photographs of children and snuff type, material and content being made. This is also around the time of Franklin and McMartin, in the years surrounding all of this is going on. So it's important to understand what the Finders cult is, and that it was originally a CIA operation that was taking children around. The cult was trading children to have their children raised by other cult members. They had a computer in the van that was creating a database and a network of these children. There was an emphasis on reading. There's just a lot of elements to them that now we see play out in the ideology behind CPS, or people that think, we should have state-raised children, or, that children should be taken from their families at all, so on and so forth. So I don't want to spend too much time on it because I know we're limited on time and you could go on forever about the Finders, but the Finders cult historically is very important to look at in terms of where we're at now with CPS, the ideologies behind it, and how we got there, the creation, the intentions, and things like that.
Right. And the connections there between that and the CIA are proven. I mean,
the D class, you can look at the D class of the Finders cult. It's an original CIA operation. There's several great people that talk about the Finders cult. And
right. All right, good. So we talked about Tim Ballard and it's a very similar grift to the election integrity grift, where they claim to be the solution. And so if you really want to help children, then you give money to me and I will help children. I'm gonna rescue children, I'm gonna whatever. Craig Sawyer runs a very similar operation with his organization. But there's a lot of them, and that's a similar pitch to America's Future as well. Give us money and we will save the children, and we're gonna end this. And Q has talked a lot about the satanic ritual abuse of children, and while I know that a lot of my audience actually really likes Q because of the MG show is really into Q. I've never been into Q. I don't have any bias for or against it, but there are a lot of people who have a very strong bias against it in this country, and so I just I can't help but wonder if that too is a similar operation to try to discredit and defame the cause. But and there's so much that we just don't know about everything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that you have to play. I want to say, for me with the Flynn situation and Tim Ballard and everything, after going up to them and asking them to focus on American child trafficking and seeing the reaction, being in those moments, having my heart sink, literally, Scott, really I started questioning and saying, like you were, about these efforts. I was like, what American families are they, showing? Who are they reuniting? Where are they showing American cases of CPS? I'm handing them this with advocates, with witnesses, with real time, with the documents. And, they want to say, oh, we're going after this person or that, they're so tough about all this other stuff. Right, Scott? So why aren't we, where was it about, getting the resources? That's all I really expected from them. Was I thought, I'm going to show up, we're going to educate the people, you're going to have the resources like a good lawyer and, advocates, and I'm literally in the same state as you, less than an hour. I mean, I lived less than 45 minutes from Dan Bongino the whole time. So Things like that. I thought simply that resources were going to happen. It would be a great example for other families and really also be able to show and establish ways that they could go about getting their children back. There was such an opportunity with them, and then I just started saying, like, where are they bringing children home? Where are they even providing anything for people to have, any action or be doing this behind the scenes? I think you get what I'm saying. And then to furthermore find out that this Benny Sun Zhu guy is actually telling families to send their casework and their information to him, and he's just gatekeeping it. And that we've dealt with that with enough arenas and with enough people, for that to be the case. And then for them to come forward and literally gaslight and victim blame people that are, coming forward about it, to say, oh, well, we tried to help you, or now you're problematic. And, I love that line because it's projection. I'm only problematic to them at this point. So they would be saying that. That's probably what they like to do. So it's horrific.
Right. So and this is something, this is the same story that I've heard from others as well that have been, they were brought in, they wanted, and another aspect of it is they wanted to get on tape their whole story. So these are victims of satanic ritual abuse. They wanted to get on tape their whole story. They wanted names, times, places, everything, on video, and we'll broadcast it to the world. And this is something that is extremely unsafe for a victim to share. I mean, this is that's essentially a death threat, a death sentence, and that is something they can actually use as blackmail material. We will release this, or we'll give this to so and so. And so, I mean, it's really manipulative and dark stuff to share there. And
Thank
did
you
you
for
have that?
saying that.
They were trying to get that out of you as well, or?
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you, representing that for victims and survivors, truly, because, not enough people, I understand with their operation. And as we're talking about today, satanic ritual abuse, SRA, that's another thing that they have done successfully, right, Scott? I mean, we have to understand, and that's kind of why I never got into that part of it. I never spoke on that kind of stuff because I didn't want to be a part of that muddying of the waters. I think that if we focus on CPS and family court, which is the source, right? I like to identify the source of something, come up with solutions, and act on those solutions in a collaborative sense or a collective way. But when we're having these these issues come up and these people are coming forward, it does endanger people. If you don't have anything that you're going to, I focused on, I digress. I focused on CPS and everything because when people start to learn about that, you will learn about satanic ritual abuse. You will learn about families who traffic their children, who have different ideologies than you, and in a very real and grounded way, you can start to understand that, because it is very important. And in America, stranger danger and all these other efforts have really detracted from a huge issue that is family trafficking or satanic ritual abuse. And aside from government and elite trafficking, right? That's something that really is very serious. There are so many survivors and victims that are trying to speak out. And yes, they, in different ways, you guys, no one understands that I have talked to almost every single one of these people. I've talked to Craig Sawyer. I was on Stu Peters. They interviewed me just like you're talking about for these little ones. They sat down and asked me to give my whole thing. I was picked up in a black SUV and taken to some incognito studio, and they asked me to give my account. I sat in a room with the lights and producers, and then they collected my information. They asked me to come back and give more. And then next thing I knew, it was that my information was too hot, quote unquote, to include in the documentary. And I haven't seen it since. So it is very real, and it puts people in danger. And I was showing up to
Yeah. So hopefully you come right back. And that I've heard that same story. Like I said, that where the ones that I've heard from refused to share it because they knew that was just not good for their own safety and well-being to share the details that they were asking. And I've talked to people that were asked even directly by Flynn and Patrick Byrne themselves for those testimonies, and there was some form of retaliation when it was refused. So I think that it is it's hard to imagine a scenario where that was done with the intent to actually help. Um, and so I mean, you talked about handling, you talked about gatekeeping in the sense of preventing your story from getting out, and it's so important too, I think, to consider where you were in your life. You needed, and this is a multi-million-dollar organization, and that purports to, it raises funds to help trafficked victims and parents. And so, you were absolutely right to have that expectation going into it that, well, maybe they can help me. You were in desperate need of legal support. And you were also in desperate need of media support, and, and to help to get your story out, to save your babies. And it didn't happen. And they didn't provide any legal support. Did they say that they were going to provide legal support?
No, it was just come on our podcast. Oh, we'll let you, we'll give you an opportunity to come on the podcast. And when you look at that, ultimately, I mean, that was exploiting me. I mean, I'm appreciative of the opportunity, but it was further exploitation where they made money off of that again, so.
Did they imply that there might be legal support?
No, I kept asking for support and legal support. They never, this Benny guy was never in the picture he just showed up during America's Future or whatever it's called. He was not in the picture. I didn't speak with Benny. He showed up around the time that the Tara Rodis and the Aaron guy showed up about the border, when those two were installed to talk about the border stuff and everything. So, that's when I remember, and not even remembering him that much. But I thought that we were getting support. I asked for a lawyer or resources, and what I got was actually a 107 infiltration instead for my first case. So there was that. And
from 107
I'm sorry?
himself?
He was behind the scenes of it. I never spoke to 107 directly. It was through one of his I don't know how to talk about this with these players and the infiltrate, all these crazy terms, but it was through one of his little puppets, and through the lawyer that they said, oh, we're going to help you and do all of that. And it was just a complete,
So
it was horrific.
They did actually offer legal help. And
no, Flynn did not directly. It was through another woman. I was contacted. Again, this is how infiltration. I was contacted. Oh, a woman online wants to help you, or she's connected in South Florida. She wants to help you. We found an attorney. And the attorney was the one who ended up being romantically involved with this 107 person. And they, came in. I don't know how to talk about without like outing people or doing whatever, because I think I have enough targets on my back right now, and I'd just rather not. But yes, it was, 107's going to help. He's even going to donate different things, and that could be fine. That could have just been hearsay, but I know that the person behind it, he showed up at my court dates. He was dating my attorney, and they had domestic disputes. They were constantly drunk and on pills, and while he's holding a Bible saying, he's under all this conservative patriot stuff. He was a podcaster that's pretty well known, but showed up all of a sudden in my hearings, and then we're leaving the courthouse, and they're trying to like instigate and get me to get upset in the courthouse. And I had to say, excuse me, this is not professional. I don't even know why you're here. I'm walking away. We even have that videotaped. Yeah, I mean, it was just horrific. Wano Savin actually heard that I was speaking up, and he went on another podcast I heard about a month or so ago, and wouldn't say my name, but tried to subtly, defame or suggest, oh, there's a woman online saying that we tried to help her. I've never spoken to this woman. It's unfortunate what she's doing. The whole victim martyr playbook again that we see.
Yeah. Like
Well,
Flynn
won't
just
say my name. Go ahead.
or like Flynn just did to Ariel, claiming that Ariel made a death threat against him, and playing victim, and then getting all of his people.
It's the PSYOP. It's a protocol. They go on, they do gaslighting, they do a victim statement, and then they attack. And they know that their minions are only going to see what they write, and they're going to get on an attack. And the same thing happened with like Eliza Blue when we exposed her working with the National Center and her, idea of a child adult sex utopia, where the community decides whether a child is ready for sex with an adult, while she's representing, promoting the National Center for Missing Exploited Children with Elon Musk. But I digress, Scott. Didn't know that was going to come up. But they use all the same tactics. Yeah. I mean, okay, I grew up in it.
So so that I understand correctly, they provided an attorney. 107's people, or somebody close to 107, said they were going to provide an attorney. They did provide an attorney, and but this attorney and this person close to 107 were in a romantic relationship with each other. That sounds like it was highly dysfunctional. There was drugs and alcohol involved, even though they claimed to be Christians. And they actually went to the courthouse. They were there, and they were trying to cause you to do things that would harm your case further. I mean, yes. So there's like they were there.
Not 107, his little minions that he sent out.
And so it sounds like they actually were sent there in order to harm your case and sabotage.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They did an entire thing in not the gentleman, but the attorney, the female attorney that was sent in. She did an entire thing in the courthouse hallway that then was used at the end. The judge used it basically to take my children, the scenario. They had a psychiatrist or a doctor that was sitting there that was part of the same private practice that's taking these children in my county. And they had him sit there. I've never spoken to him. I had never talked to him before. And they were out on break. We're talking. They say, oh, your parents might give you a mediation, offering me some deal when I'm saying, in panic and trauma, I never did anything wrong. I'm not making a deal with the state when I did nothing wrong to begin with. This is fraud from the beginning. Made this entire scenario that I can't describe in the hallway of the courthouse with the, police around and everything. Then they go in and say that they walk this doctor that was sitting there, this psychiatrist, they walk him in and he says, I saw Miss Walsh point her finger at a man outside. I was doing something like this or talking, we're talking about negotiating over my children here. This is not like a light thing in a public forum, right? So he says, I saw her point her finger at a gentleman out in the hallway. And this is indicative of the abuse that she does to her children. And went on to it's the experts in CPS. If we want to go back from Flynn and CPS, with another way that they're taking the children is they're contracting and hiring expert witnesses. So these people are testifying, never having met you or know anything, and they're allowed to do that to take your children. So they did that, and he went in and testified, and then the judge used that scenario in the final judgment to terminate my rights. It was completely fabricated. So it was insane. No, I just, it's the worst part is that I grew up in this, and my father, with what he does and how he manipulates and how he does things, and it just really, really, I get hard on myself because I didn't see it, with the Flynn network, and I didn't see it with all this when my children were on the line. So that I feel guilt about, but I also don't, because these are people that took advantage of me in trauma and severe trauma with my children. So.
Right. And so, did they ever connect you with any resources that were legitimately helpful? I mean, did they ever do anything that was actually legitimately helpful? Counseling, or, obviously, uh, um,
Every
and
day was some drama, Scott. Every day was some drama. It was a phone call here, maybe an opportunity there, maybe this. It was such runaround. I had to take the last at least 8 months off to recover. I had to relocate. And it's also in conjunction with my father and that stuff. I'm not solely saying, the Flynn network did all of this, and I'm not here to attack or expose anyone, but I'm also going to speak about what has happened.
Mhm. Was this attorney the attorney that was actually on your case? Is it somebody that's in the court record?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, there's that question right there. So that could be gleaned by somebody that wants to look that up. So, well, thank you for sharing this. I know it's a difficult story to share, not just because of the trauma that it caused you, but also because, as I've seen, these people are, they do make threats, and there is a history of following through with those threats, and so yeah, it is frightening, and I will continue to pray for you and for your protection. And there are, we've had a lot of viewers on today, and so I appreciate you being here, and I'm seeing also a lot of appreciation for you and for your telling your story. So,
Thank you.
this is definitely a really important story, and it's not just this is we covered a lot of ground here in the last hour and 20 minutes. And
Yeah, we
internet
did. We did. And
and all.
I want to thank you, Scott, for giving me this opportunity for us doing these shows and starting to work together, because then we can get to this space where we can see change. This is not about me at all. I hate talking about me. I think, as you've seen when you ask questions, I hate talking about, because this has such a wider implication, because this is affecting so many people. And the fact that we have so many people that also don't understand what this is and don't know yet, don't realize it. So that's my main intention and motivation for being here and for speaking as I do. Obviously, once we figure that out, my children come home, and we can be returning a lot of other children. It's not that they're missing. We have adoption records, we have family records, we have that kind of stuff where we could see a positive change moving forward. But I just want to thank you for creating this space for people to that maybe wouldn't necessarily hear about it or understand what's going on, to be able to be exposed to that information. Thank you.
Now, if people want to help you, because the need is really great for you. I mean, you really do need an attorney, and someone who can help you to fight, because this needs to be taken to a higher appeals court that would have the power to examine this whole thing from the beginning, and to look at where the judge went wrong. And I mean, you need help getting your children back, and you've been out there telling this story, which most mothers in this situation, dealing with the trauma of not having your children, I mean, you're fighting for your children's lives, and at the same time you're out educating people, telling them about not just what's happened to you, but what's happening to other children as well. and trying to be an advocate for this cause, which is really needed. So, how can people help you and send help?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Again, my Cash App is M Walsh Consulting with the money sign in front. M Walsh Consulting, as well as on PayPal, is Family, Farm, and Faith. It's all spelled out, not a symbol or an AND. Family, Farm, and Faith at gmail.com. And I really appreciate that. As you know, I do little jobs here and there for what I can, but people in my position, especially mine, really, it's hard to get work, and there's almost a concerted effort to make sure that you don't. So I do need a lawyer. It's not just about money. We need resources. And again, I speak this because I hope that other people will start to find not organizations or influencers to donate to, but to really start finding ways that you can support victims or survivors or people in your community. So, if you have resources like a small business or different things like that, reach out to people or please let me know and I can help facilitate that. But I guess I wanted to give that tidbit that money obviously is very important. I need to be able to eat and things like that, but also, to be able to find other people that you can support and in different ways for, based on what you have in your life and kind of developing that is a really great thing that I like to just suggest. And I want to thank everyone that has supported me and speaks up about this every day.
Great. Well, we will, we'll talk about, I think that there's still quite a lot that we can discuss, and I'd love to have you back on, and I'm sure my audience would love to hear more from you as well. So thank you for coming. Thank you all for joining us. And there will be another show tomorrow at 3:00, and I've got several things I'll be talking about current events wise, and including a story that I just published today about Burns' attorney, Stephanie Lambert, who admitted in a court document that she is that she has worked under law enforcement. And so we'll have there's quite a bit to talk about as far as where are the feds within the Flynn network. So that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow.
I'm waiting for that one, Scott.
Thanks, Megan. All right. Well, thanks again, and until next time.